they did a workshop with singing bowls, and a lot of it's the intent that obviously goes into when you play it. The frequency, obviously they're all tuned to different frequencies, so they're all tuned. Some of them are tuned to 432, and then there's a whole set of 432. Some are solfeggio scale frequencies, some of them are just basically the notes of the scale, which, yeah, we know frequency does have an effect in things. And when they played it, I mean, it was, you know, they had just loads of them, big 24-inch ones, and, you know,
wow.
So it was very, very interesting. One I've got is just a 7-inch,
Wow.
but quite interesting, because when I just sat there, because I'm skeptical of a lot of stuff, just because it's not my thing. You know, I'm not skeptical, but it's just like, oh well, take it or leave it. But actually, just sitting while they were engaging it, and something happened. You felt it activates something. You felt it engage. You know, I found it easier to connect in terms of what was going on at a different dimensional level by there. So, you know, it was like, and I was just sort of thinking, because before I went away, one of the things we're looking to do here is to do sort of therapeutic interventions for people coming from a more alternative way. So sound, forgiveness therapy, truth therapy, light therapy, you know, and we're looking for, okay, a download of, well, what's that going to look like? And how do we engage people and engage their spirit and their soul, you know, through sound and frequency and different things. So I would already been starting to, you know, meditate around that. So when I went and into the conference, and I saw all these different alternative things, I was like, okay, oh, maybe here's an opportunity to sort of observe something. And I began talking to the people who were, you know, doing it and engaging. So ultimately, and I was thinking, well, do I need to buy a bowl and then learn how to use it? And someone gave me one. So they gave me one of these crystal bowls, quartz crystal bowls, and, you know, and I managed to get it home without breaking it, you know, which was, it was in my backpack, packed around. But since I've been back, you know, I've been just playing with it in a sense, just thinking, well, how does this work? You know, to start with, it was like, I'm not sure. But, you know, the more I've done it and the more other people have listened to it, it does reverberate around. It's a resonant frequency. It's not just a sound. It moves around you and in you and through you. I mean, you can feel it when it, you know, when you're playing it, you're vibrating with it while you're playing it. And when I did a session on the last night about deconstruction of the mind, and I asked their musicians, which they're all into drums and rhythms and stuff and these bowls, just to do whatever they wanted. Yeah, I'll hold it up, to effectively just look to help in the deconstruction process. So they brought all these bowls out, and one of them was a big 24-inch one. And so one of them gave me one of the little mallet things that you use and says, well, have a go. So obviously my intent was to release sounds, frequencies that will begin to engage the mind and help in the deconstruction process. But I was there for 20 minutes. I had this thing going, this sound going. And literally my whole arm and body was vibrating with it. I mean, it's a big one. It was a 24-inch one. But this one is a 12-inch. No, a 7-inch one. It's a C. And you just basically play it by sort of rimming it. So it's made of quartz, pure quartz crystal. It's heated to 4,000 degrees and spun like a candy floss centrifuge into a mold. And the molds obviously produce different tones and different notes that then are used when you play it. So then when you play it, you can do it different ways. You've got a mallet, which has got a sort of smooth end and a felt end. And the felt sort of produces a sort of slightly different tone. So you basically just hit it and then just use the mallet to begin to increase the resonance, which then it increases. So you can sort of do it sort of, but but it really does start to resonate and begins to go around you and through you. And then you can play it on the side. It's harder with holding it because it's not heavy exactly, but you can do it on the side as well. So you can actually use the side rather than the rim, and that sort of produces a different sort of sound. But we're just playing with it, and it was one of those things that, because I'd already been engaging God around frequency and sound for healing and restoration and helping people with mental health issues and soul issues, and then when they came, I just resonated with what they were saying and doing, and literally they are using it in the medical field. They're finding certain tones stop blood flow when they do operations. So some people, hospitals are playing them in theaters to produce a sound which actually stops the flow of blood, which is quite interesting. But you know, for some people, I mean, I've played them for some people and they're like, whoa, that's really, really intense. And I'm thinking, oh, it didn't sound very intense to me, but it's obviously how it impacts the individual. And others have just felt, wow, they can feel it going around them and in, through and out, and just creating the intent of the player effectively through that particular frequency, and how their spirit is letting them play it. You know, there's not like you can hit it like this and you do this. You just have to do it and let your spirit begin to determine how your hand is flowing, what your intent is. People pray in tongues while they're doing it and amplify that. Some people put fragrant oils drops in the bowl and actually play it like that, so that the fragrance, some of the bowls are colored, so that they're of the 7 colors of the rainbow, so you can engage like the 7 spirits of God or redemptive gifts, or the color as well as just the sound. So it's all sorts of potential things, which, you know, a few years ago I would have just wouldn't have been interested in at all. But just as, you know, you engage God deeper and you realize, you know, how his voice is vibrating, how his grace, you know, is the vibrational frequency, the power of God that holds everything together, you begin to realize, hey, there's a lot more than what we can imagine or think. And therefore I'm sort of open to a little bit to, okay, God, if he's got something in this that you're going to help us do. And some people will say, well, why don't you just pray for people, lay hands on them, and it will be the same thing. And it's just like, well, why did Jesus heal in lots of different ways? You know, if it was just as simple as saying the words, he wouldn't have done it the same. He would have done it the same way every time. He didn't. He made mud, he spat, he told them to go and do something. He laid hands on them, he spoke to them. He even said the words and they weren't even there. And, you know, why did Paul pray into handkerchiefs and aprons and get them to what was in it that was actually releasing something that he had imparted into it? I mean, you know, how did Peter's shadow heal? Well, it wasn't Peter's shadow. It was actually the atmosphere that he had generated through his body, through his life, that people came into and responded to, you know. So yeah, interesting though. Interesting sort of different things that God's unveiling. And so.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, science and frequency and all that stuff, there's so many new things coming out. I mean, I read an article just the other day that put out by some prestigious neuroscience, you know, the guys that are into all of that kind of stuff. And now they're saying the gray matter in our brain that they didn't even know what it was, it actually has neurotransmitters in it that go to, they think, as many as 11 dimensions, which, you know, that is like, wow, that now, you know, science is starting to explain some of the stuff we do, you know, in the spiritual realm, and, you know, and engaging God and other realms, and you know, talk about fearfully and wonderfully made.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, my first engagements in heaven were quantum physics lessons. Yeah, he explained these things, string theory, that the different dimensions have to be for string theory to exist, the vibrational frequency of his voice, harmony, resonance, frequency. I mean, you know, quantum entanglement, quantum tunneling, quantum observance. I mean, I had no idea any of that stuff. He told me it. I mean, he showed me it. So, you know, it wouldn't have been the first thing I would have thought that would have happened when I was in the realm of heaven, but it was, because there is something that God is unveiling and facilitating us understanding how he made creation, how creation is held together, how creation responds to our sonship. You know, and how did Jesus turn water into wine? You know, well, he did it and told us to do similar things. So if we're going to turn, you know, I wouldn't turn water into wine because I don't like wine. You know, I might be a real killjoy at a party. I'll turn wine into water because I like water. We've run out of water. Okay, I'll turn the wine into water. Oh, no. But hey, you know, what about turning wood into gold when we have need of provision? You know, it's like Jesus gave these things as models, as examples of the things that we could do. You know, how did the coin get into the fish's mouth? You know, and I've heard some, you know, ridiculous things. Oh, well, it must have fell out of a fisherman's pocket and the fish swallowed it. And I mean, just coming up with sort of nonsense. But rather than, hey, no, Jesus spoke it into being. He saw the reality where that coin was in the fish's mouth, and it was in the fish's mouth. You know, so using the power of our consciousness to create a reality which is aligned with the will of God and the heart of God. So, yeah, there's a lot more around these things that we need to think. You know, how did Jesus disappear, you know, in front of people or pass through people? Because he went quantumly into a non-local realm and came out tunneled on the other side. So quantum tunneling, I mean, literally his whole, because not just some particles of his being were in and out of that realm. He took the whole of his being into that realm and out the other side. You know, it's just, so yeah, it is fascinating in the sense that science is beginning to catch up. But it's for us to begin to learn to use these things so that it isn't just magic. Well, we pray a few hocus pocus words and put Jesus in the name of Jesus on the end and hope for the best. Well, Jesus didn't do that. And Jesus never said in Jesus' name, did he? When he healed anybody. So he just was already in his name because it was the power of his name, because he was his own authority in that. So I think some people I know just, oh, well, I just pray and I just believe. Great. If that's where people are at, you know, well, great. But I do believe God wants us to mature to a level where we are having the same mindsets that he did, and we have the mind of Christ, and we begin to think in a particularly non-linear way, to not think the way we're created to think by the world. I mean, on Monday night, I watched the film Arrival. Have you seen that film? And, you know, again, it was just because it so felt like that has been my journey. The more I've spent time within the mind and the heart of God outside of time and space, the more my thinking is aligned with how they think there. So my thinking has become more non-linear, you know, in its approach, because I've been in that realm, engaging in that realm, and I've become like I'm beholding. And I thought it was fascinating because she used a linguistic expression that when you study languages and you immerse yourself in a language, it can actually rewire your brain. And hers in the thing, obviously, to be rewired non-linearly, so that she was able to draw from something that hadn't happened, in a sense. Now, you could say, well, is that the future? For me, I don't think it is the future, because I don't believe the future is fixed. But I do believe it's the heart of God. So I can draw from within the heart of God into my destiny for things that I need to get answers to today that I don't have yet, but I'm drawing them out of my future destiny to bring them into my today, which I do all the time. You know, I'm always talking about stuff I don't know. You know, well, where did I know that? Well, I knew that out of the heart of God, and it's now, all now for him, and all now for me when I'm in him. So I can draw out of the same non-linearity of thinking, which is restricting me to Well, what do I know now? It's like, well, what will I know when I'm in maturity? Well, in the thoughts of God, I'm already in maturity. It's already a finished, done deal. So I only have to connect with who I am there to be able to draw out of that which does not yet physically exist, but it exists there. So if you live from a non-linear, non-local perspective there, then you have access to the omniscience of God. In relation to I can't relate to everything that everyone knows. I can relate to his omniscience in regard to me and my destiny. And anything he wants to reveal, of course, which could be anything, But it's quite fun to, when you begin to think non-linearly, because you don't think in problems and solutions anymore in the same way. It's like it's all solution. For me, it's like I'm living in the joy of the solution and the peace of the solution before I even know the solution, because I do know the solution because I'm in God. So there's this whole dynamic which is quite fun to begin to pursue, to see, hey, there's no impossibilities. I'm not looking at it with, ooh, how do I work that one out? But it does mean then we can begin to set the river flowing into our future now. So what am I going to need next week, the week after, the week after? Well, I need to start calling it into being now, so that draws to it the outworking of it. So it's like, when you look at the Amazon River, I mean, I've been on the Amazon River, on the Rio Negro, the black bit of it, the dark sort of river, and it's huge. I mean, I was just not expecting the scale. It's like some of it's like miles and miles wide. Well, when you actually look at that, you think, wow, look at this volume of water that's flowing. And then you go and look at the source, and it's a trickle coming out of a spring. You think, well, how is that possible? How can this little flow become this miles of wide water? Because it has to start somewhere. It has to start. Now, if we start creating that which is the reality which aligns with our destiny, and begin to release it like a river that begins to flow, by the time it's got to us, then it is in a place where we can then see it outworked. But most people are hanging around waiting for God to do something and praying, God, will you do something? And they've never ever done anything themselves. If we do not speak creatively and choose that reality and begin to set it in motion, then it won't happen. Or if we're fortunate, God will have mercy on us and do something on our behalf. But he's having less and less of that, because he knows he wants to mature us, and you don't mature someone by doing it always for them all the time. So I think we are in this place of learning to be able to see, to hear, to engage, to operate non-linearly, to operate in those dimensions which are, not the time and space dimensions that we're used to, all because we are maturing to operate out of the mind of Christ and not out of our natural reasoning or understanding, which does mean that we are responsible for. So if I need provision for something, how is that provision going to come? In the way that I actually choose to materialize it, whether it be it's going to appear, or whether someone is going to give me it, or I'm going to be able to have it received in. I can choose those realities out of the heart of God, because those are the abundance I need for the good works that God has prepared for me to do. I have more than enough for all my needs and an abundance for all those good deeds. And Ephesians 2:10 says that he's already prepared them for me. They're my destiny. So I'm involved in seeing from the eternal perspective the release of everything needed, both in abilities, relationships, people, everything, to see the fulfillment of my destiny. And then I live in the joy of that. And then I'm at peace and rest, not trying to, oh no, I hope it's going to turn up from somewhere. No, I know it's already on its way, because I set it in motion, and it's still actually moving in that motion towards me. So at this point, there it is. You know, we used to try and do that from a faith message perspective, was trying to visualize something and call it in, be not as if it were, and call it into being. We just weren't doing it from a heavenly perspective out of the heart of God. So we were doing it here. And, you know, that is less successful than doing it from that heavenly perspective. So it's established there first, so it can come into this realm. You know, and it's like faith is just the manifestations of the things we're expecting. So why are we expecting them? Because we've called them into being. You know, that's why are expecting them. We called them into being, so we have an absolutely, totally white hot expectation that they're going to be manifested because we called them into being. You know, then faith will be the substance that actually produces that in the physical realm out of the spiritual realm. You know? So interesting, isn't it? These sort of things that, you know, but the more you connect with God and are more intimate, the more these things unveil. Yeah, that's the reality. They unveil from relationship. And when they become formulaic and non-relational, then there is no life in them anymore. So it's making sure that everything we do comes out of our relationship. Yeah, then it's going to flow. So.
Very good, Mike. Wow, awesome. Hey, two new folks with us, Janice and Jay.
Yep.
They are to the Aging God program and have joined us one time in one of our meetings. So they're kind of new. So I'm sure you've blown their minds already by what you've said. So
it's fun. So, yeah. So yeah, I'll throw it open for anything anyone wants to talk about, or any questions anyone's got, and yeah, happy to go from there.
Mike, when you talked about,
Yep.
you were just talking about actually, well, how do I phrase this? Actually doing in heaven what we were normally doing by using the word and confessing.
Yeah.
Can you sort of give an example of how you would do something like that? Because I sort of understand the theory of what you're saying. I'm not quite understanding, I hate to say the word, the mechanics, but what does that look like?
I think it looks like whatever it looks like for every individual through who they are, because for what it looks like for me is a calling forth, it's a decreeing, a declaring. What it looks like for me is I am in the heart of God continually, because I'm non-linearly operating. So I'm not going to the heart of God. What I would have done, this is what I would have done. I would have presented myself as a living sacrifice. I would have potentially gone to the altar. I would eventually go into the four faces of God. I would begin to find a mandate. I would begin to start decreeing or declaring from within the four faces, governmentally, with the word, with the legislation. But then once I discovered the priestly connection, that took me back into eternity, outside of time and space. Now, I tried to understand that with my mind, and I couldn't do it to start with, because my mind was not rewired that way at that point in time. So I just used to go there in my spirit. And then have I been there for a while, sometimes God would speak to me. Sometimes I would just, my spirit was receiving something that I wasn't aware of. And then I would go and stand back in the four faces of God. I might do some more calling. Then I would go to my mountain and I would start decreeing and declaring. But now actually I'm in all those places at the same time. So I am on the altar as a continual living sacrifice. I'm always sat on my mountain. I am always in the four faces of God in the name of God, because I'm in him. I'm always in his heart in eternity because I'm in him, because we're in Christ Jesus. So now I'm not thinking linearly. I don't do them as a progression. I live from being in all those places. Now, sometimes I cognitively connect to a place, particularly when God wants to show me something or reveal something to me so that I do have a cognitive memory of it, I go there, or I go and, but a lot of the time I'm just there. I'm there now. You know, I'm there continually now, flowing from there. So when I used to do it from one place, I would end up on my mountain, and then I would make declarations and decrees. So I would call things that be not as if they were, you know, from the fact that I'd just been in the heart of God, that I had the government of God being in his name, but now I would use the authority to decree, send angels, align, use legislation, actually say words, you know, sometimes release a sound or a color, a fragrance, you know, do all sort, whatever your spirit leads you to do, really. So that really for me was a linear journey of discovering how to be in all these different places, but then function from two of them. So I'm dual realms in heaven and on earth. So that one stream from where I am on my mountain would flow through me here as a gateway into the earth, and I would decree and declare or say things to people or explain things or share some things that I didn't know and write them down, and that was great. Once I was in all those multiple places at the same time, it was like now I have multiple streams coming into a river, which is increasing. So it's like, you know, I had the source of the Nile flowing. Now I've got all the tributaries of the Nile coming into the Nile, all flowing, or the Amazon or whatever. So it's like almost now there's such an increase. And some of the doing is what you would do in any other way. It's like but you're doing it from a different perspective, from a different level of connection to the heart of God. So the desire of God is your desire, and you release that desire through your spirit the way you release it. So I do a lot of calling forth, you know, that, and I use the words, I call forth, you know, this, and I call forth that, and I call for this, and, you know, or I sometimes assign angels, or, you know, and sometimes I do say, I choose the reality where this is going to begin to form, and so it can be manifested at this particular time when it's needed. Because I'm not going to be caught unawares. I am responsible for preparing the resources that are available to me for my mandate to be fulfilled every day. I'm not just saying, God, oh, well, will you meet my needs today? I am now in a position of being able to not meet my own needs, but in relationship with him as a son, creatively release the resource that's going to be needed. Whether that resource is insight, understanding, revelation. I frame my day with, I have all that I need today to fulfill everything that I'm called to do today. So I have an expectation totally that I have everything I need to say, I have everything I need to do. It's all there because I've chosen the reality where it is there. So I'm not subject to the circumstances. So when that comes to actually practically doing something, I mean, an example of this would be about 4 or 5 years ago, one of our bench of three had a desire for housing, and it was part of our blueprint, and he began to see that housing would be part of our solution of provision and being able to engage people and bring people into a safe environment. He saw houses were the solution. Now, we didn't have any houses. So, but he saw that, he's cultivated the desire, he shared it, started to release the sound. You know, others picked it up and were started, hey, yeah, we're believing for housing. We believe, you know, so I remember someone got up in front of the church on the Sunday morning and said, I am testifying to the houses that we're going to receive, you know, when we didn't have any, you know, but it was sort of a, you know, that's the way. And then someone phones up and says, I want to buy a house in your region. I want you to manage it for us. I want you to look after it. I want to give it to you for your use. You choose who's going to be in it, because I want to support what you're doing. And then he said, and also the rent that you give me, I'm going to give you back. So that was what he did, you know. Well, where did that come from? Out of the blue? By magic, or actually as a result of what was set in motion through the desires and words and then releasing that to flow. And now we've got 9 houses and more on the way, you know. So the same thing would be apply on and that's a sort of a long-term thing where you see something is created here and then it starts to flow towards you as a river until you connect with it and you then put your well in, draw from the source that's come, you know. So you draw from the source when it comes across your path. But then there may be something you have to do like now. So, you know, when I needed the reality that I would get to my office and be able to see someone at 8 o'clock in the morning and it's 7:45 and I'm not even dressed. That's the reality. I was in that situation. What could I have done? Well, I could have rushed, tried to get there, rung the guy, told him I was going to be late. No, I chose the reality that I would get there on time. Now, I didn't know how that was going to be formed, but I needed it to be formed there and then because I'm at 7:45. And when I go upstairs and I change and I wash and I get ready and I come down and my watch says 7:45, but the clock on the wall says 7:55, I am now in a bubble which is actually operating outside of the normal time that I can see going on around me. And then eventually, you know, I walked to work because I didn't have the car that day, which is a 15-minute walk. And I get there 7:55. Having tested it, because I went out into the garden, watered the plants, fed the fish, did everything that I wouldn't have done if I was rushing because I didn't have the time. I saw I have the time to do everything I need to do and get to my office in the right time to be able to see that person. And literally when I left the house, it was 8:05 in the time that was on the kitchen clock. And yet I got to my office at 7:05 because my watch didn't start ticking until 3/4 of the way down the walk. And this is a perpetual watch. I mean, it does not stop. So I was in a suspended state created by my own choice of that reality that I will get there. Now, in another situation, it may have been that I relocated and got there instantly. That would have been another way that happened. So there was multiple ways it could have happened. For me, it happened that time stopped for me. Even though I was doing things, there was no time consequence to me doing it. You know, so those type of things is a choice to see that possibility, to collapse it, which scientifically is called popping a quiff. You choose a possibility and you collapse it. So all other possibilities fade away and they become impossible. So there was no possibility of me not being there on time because I'd chosen the only reality that would be. All others fell away. So that's how it works. Now, I've done that a number of times in different things, in different situations, which have facilitated me being able to either travel in over a distance quicker than it's possible to travel, you know, angels being involved in shifting winds so that winds propel us faster than, you know, which is what happened when I went to New Zealand. I had an hour stopover in Hong Kong. An hour is a reasonably short thing to get off a plane and get onto another one. We took off an hour late. So from natural thing, but I was in no way coming from a place of panic or worry or it was like, no, it's okay. We'll get there on time. And then guy on the town, the co-pilot says, okay, we've got a strong headwind, so we're not going to be able to make up any time. You know, we're going to get there probably even later. Sorry for those who've got flights. But sorry, there's nothing we can do about it. So at that point, I said, well, yes, there is something we can do about it because we are going to get there on time. And if there's a wind problem, I have a mate called the Winds of Change who can change winds. So I engaged the angel, the winds of change, and I got him to change the wind. An hour later, the guy comes over the thing. We've had a remarkable shift of wind. We now have a very strong tailwind, and the likelihood is that we'll get there. So we got there early, you know. So that was a choice. Now I could have panicked, or I could have thought, oh no, I'm going to miss my flight. Oh, I better contact them, tell them I'm not going to be there on time. Oh, no. you know, but I didn't. I chose the reality where I was going to be able to fulfill what God called me to do, and it was that. You know, when I was there, we had a scenario. I was in Auckland, and you know, I was speaking. It went on a bit, questions, and we got out, and it was absolutely tipping down with rain, and the gate was locked. You know, the caretaker either got fed up of waiting for us, or decided he forgot about that we were in the building, and he locked the gate, padlocked it. There was a whole car park full of cars of people wanting to get out. So at the front of the cars going to go out, there were two ladies who were trying to escape, I guess, who weren't yet believers. One was a Sikh, and another was a Christian, and a lady who worked for a Christian. And so they were invited. So, and I've been talking a lot about angels and different things. And so they looked at me, and because they couldn't get out, and they looked at me and, you know, tongue in cheek said, well, can you send an angel to open the gate? And, you know, because they were just joking. So I actually said, no, we don't need an angel, because I saw the reality where I would open the gate. So I walked up to the gate, took the padlock, opened it, and opened the gate. And it was locked. A load of people had tried. It was locked. But I opened it because I saw that that was the reality to deal with this situation. And I chose that reality, you know. So how did I do it? I saw it. I chose to accept it. Then I activated it by going and doing it. I may have seen it and said it if I was in a different scenario. So some of it would probably not look that much different from what the faith movement would teach people to do. Well, visualize it. Put a plane on your desk so you can get a new plane if you're Kenneth Copeland or Creflo Dollar or whatever, you know. That type of, you know, mindset, but they're doing it from this side of the veil, and they're trying to get stuff to come to them out of that realm. They're not in that realm, releasing it into this realm, which is where the faith movement fell down. It didn't go to the next step. Now, I don't know if have you ever, Charles Capps, who was quite a big name in the faith movement, his daughter, I think, is it Anna or something, she wrote a book called Quantum Faith, which I think was a possibility to be a connection to the next step. Annette Capps, to the next step of, we need to do this from a different perspective and different realm. But I'm not sure that most of them picked up on it, you know. So they're still operating in money cometh to me now type things, ka-ching, ka-ching, which, you know, for them, it works a little bit because a whole load of people are giving them money. For most of the people who they're trying to encourage to do it, it doesn't work because they're not in the same dynamic. But when you do it from a heavenly perspective, and you're doing it from the heart of God, and you're only doing it to fulfill that which you have been destined to do, and not for selfish reasons, then it can manifest through us. We can release it into this realm from that realm by using declarations and decrees, establishing it so that it begins to build momentum. Just like, you know, it starts as a trickle, but by the time it's got to us, it is flowing and has life in it that we have effectively created. We have created that which was in it by what we have said and what we have thought, out of that conscious ability to create a reality and choose it apart from all the other realities. And when you're at rest within the heart of God, you don't come from any sense of lack or fear or anything else. Most people here who are trying to get stuff out of heaven, the spiritual blessings and everything manifested, are doing it out of fear and panic and lack, you know, not out of a place of faith in and rest, which is very different when you're living in that place of rest, because you're living in the joy of it already happening. You know, it's like love and joy and peace are such a powerful three that work together to establish a lifestyle where we live loved, we love living, and we live loving. And those are an expression of love, joy, because I am living in the joie de vie, the joy of life, and peace, that I am bringing wholeness into everything, because I'm now loving people and the situation in a way that flows out of the love that I'm experiencing. It changes the dynamic of how we live, because we don't have to live from the perspective of our circumstances here. So yeah. So that's what it looks like for me. But for you, it may be slightly different, but it does need to be established in heaven first, so it can be established on the earth. That's the your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And the more we mature, the more of the as it is in heaven that we are responsible for. Yeah.
Well, I also asked that too, because lately a lot of my focus has been on being in Christ in God.
Yes. Yeah.
And him being in me, which means we are absolutely inseparable. And everything that entails. And so when I'm in him, I am in peace. When I'm in him, I am in love. When I'm in him, I am in health. When I am in him, there is no fear. And just taking time with him, just being with him, not necessarily looking for answers or anything, but just, for lack of a better word, acclimating myself to say, this is the reality, not what I see around me. The reality is being in him, and then really asking for his help to really be able to comprehend all that involves and to experience it.
Yeah.
And it's totally changing the whole perspective of what life is really like, because understanding when we are actually in him, everything changes.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I appreciate what you said.
Yeah, because it has to flow out of a relationship. This isn't formulaic, which is, I think, what the faith movement became, was more formulaic. If you do this, you're guaranteed to get that. And it leaves the relational out of it. And the more we are in relationship, and the more we're in him, as you say, knowing that he's in us and we're living in this intimacy of relationship, then we begin to flow from him, and we are like him. The more we behold him, the more we become like him. The more our mind gets rewired, the more our consciousness gets expanded, the more the limitations are removed, because there's nothing impossible in him. So our limitations, our restrictions get sprung off. You know, our mindsets, our belief systems, they fall away. You know, that's being in him has been the key to deconstructing my mind, renewing my mind, you know, living from a different perspective because I'm in him. It all came through relational encounters. People ask, how do I renew my mind? And years ago, we would have taken the word, we would have confessed it, we'd have tried to believe it, we'd confess it and confess it, and eventually it'd be like, yeah, I'm convinced of this. But the reality was, we just knew a word. Our mind still was functioning in the same way it functioned before. We just believed something and hoped, really, generally. But now, if our minds are going to be renewed, they're renewed by my relationship in God, and he reveals himself in me, something which actually totally challenges the way I used to think about him, or used to think about how he did something, or used to think about, and all of a sudden I've experienced something which creates this cognitive dissonance, which then, hey, now I cannot hold on to what I used to believe or my presumptions, because I've now experienced this. So the relational experience is what changes our mind and thinking, not trying to. Because if you try and change your mind and stop thinking about something, you can't stop thinking about it by trying to stop thinking about it, because you're thinking about it, which just it re-enhances that you're thinking about it. It doesn't work. So you've got to stop thinking about what you want to change and actually engage with the truth, because the truth that I know will now renew my thinking in that area out of the relationship that I have. So many of the encounters were designed to be challenging to the things I believed. And then now I have the encounter which says that what I believe wasn't right, because now I have an experience to prove that it wasn't right. Then it falls away. I don't have to try and stop believing that anymore. because I'm now have a testimony of a different way of how this works, or a different aspect of God's character and nature, you know, that isn't the way I thought he was, and how that function, you know. Yeah. And that all then, you know, flows into the having a mind that operates like the mind of Christ. So having our consciousness that is able to be creative like him, because we're made in his image. And also then all the things that restrict and help stop us do just begin to fall away. It's sometimes they need a bit of a shaking, and these encounters do the shaking. You know, they impact you. They create this resonance, this whoa, and it's shaken what I used to believe. And now I believe something different. So all the sort of encounters in, you know, in beyond the realm, and the veil, and all those things have, in a sense, come from the relationship with God, that he has unveiled something of who he is that just so totally radically was so different from what I thought he was, that now I'm ruined to that perspective anymore. I can't have perspectives I used to have, because they're ruined for me, because God, which is great, because I want him to ruin them, you know. But it comes out of the relationship, and I think that's always the case. We've got to be careful we don't try and formularize something or put it into a pattern that everyone can follow. It's got to be some principles of that in relationship we can discover and outwork ourselves. Yeah. So any other questions? Anyone want to ask anything else? Share anything?
That was good. Definitely. Send us the link for this when you finish. This one again.
I will. Yeah. Yeah. The thing is, you know, I've forgotten what I've said now, because I've just said it, you know, but I know it's coming out of my spirit. So I know I'll be able to say it again when I need to say it again, you know, and when I need to actually explain to people, well, I'll be able to put it down on paper you know, and teach it when I need to teach it, you know, because that's how it flows, you know. I may not have said things quite like that in other ways, but now I've said it like that, that then becomes part of my outworking of it, I suppose. Anyway, but I'll definitely send you the link. So right. Okay, anything else? We've got some time left.
Just one little offshoot about being in Christ.
Yeah.
And the more when you think about it, to me, it begins to resolve what appears to be the differences between science and, for lack of a better word, religion, even in terms of creation. Because to me, in the beginning does not mean time, it means a location, and the beginning is Christ.
Yeah.
And so that changes for me the whole concept of what does a day look like? Well, this is a day in eternity, which is not necessarily the same thing of ours. And I said to my friend Warren, who says that God couldn't take a 24-hour day that we know and accelerate billions of years into one 24-hour span, because he's outside of time, so that it can still be technically a 24-hour day here, but billions of years of experience happen because it's in him, and he's just able to do all kinds of wild and crazy things. It just the possibility, it changes everything. But then to know it wasn't necessary, to me, that first thing is not talking about a time frame, it's talking about location.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also relationship, because actually the Hebrew understanding of it is face to face. In the beginning, and in John, where it's like in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, it meant the Word was face to face. Jesus was face to face with God in relationship in the beginning, and not, as you say, the beginning of time, just in their relationship, but actually the reality is, scientifically, there are those who have actually extrapolated the speed of light and the slowing down of the speed of light that has been observed in the past, since we can measure it, and extrapolated that 7 or 6 days actually does equal 13.4 billion years, using the same equations that indicate this slowing down, because the speed of light, of course, is relative to you're in it. So it could appear to be a day that was, because it's relative, it's not fixed. If it's not fixed, it's, which is why people want a fixed speed of light, because otherwise it throws all these things into complete possibilities for them, and they don't like it. Scientists don't like it, but they have had to accept that they have proved that light has slowed down. And if you extrapolate it, therefore, a day would be billions of years, because the speed of light is faster. So if you think the speed of light travels 1 billion times faster than it does now, then one day would be 1 billion years in that way. You know what I mean? Because it is all relative to the speed of light. So time is relative speed. So matter and energy is still relative to the speed of light. So if we live in created light, then we are living in the sense where that created light is slowing down. That's it, because it started off as creative light coming out of God, who is light, and as he spoke it out, it has slowed down over that period, because it's got, in a sense, if you think, and my experience of this is that each of the realms of heaven functions at a different speed of light, so they all operate on a different time frame. So when I'm in the realms of heaven, I can be there a few minutes and it feels like a week. Where I'm in the kingdom of God, it feels pretty much the same as now, only slightly faster. Each of the realms, the closer you seem to get to eternity, which is, the place where God is and was the beginning, is all now, because it is the highest speed of light that can exist. It is God himself, who is creative light. So these things do actually scientifically have a basis. And, Norman and Setterfield, who are the Christian guys who proposed these theories, and they were poo-pooed when they put it out years ago. Science had to accept that their calculations were correct, and that they have proved that light is slowing down. And obviously, if you only measure it over a number of years, or, it's almost imperceivable, because of the relative nature to it. But if you go back to Jesus's time, 2,000 years ago, well, the speed of light was faster then. But they were still relatively operating in it, and it is a very interesting thing. But then, our engagement with time, then being in Him, means that we have access to what has passed, to begin to engage it and be used in it. As we've had testimonies of people, myself and others, actually being used to answer prayers in that time, because I'm available and God can use me, because it's for Him, it's all now, and He's using me to bring good out of the situation. So it is fun when you start to realize that the limitations that we have had put on us by religion and science are all being completely renewed in the fact of God, who God really is, in terms of the creator, and being light and being spirit and being love and all He is. And then we don't have to argue in the creationist view of, well, it's all happened in 7 literal days, and those 7 literal days were 7 literal days, and God just did it. Of course, God could have made something with the appearance of age. He could have done. I mean, there's no he could have done. But the way God did something, for Him, it's all coming out of Him being now. And I think that's where our minds being renewed to be non-local and also non-linear will help us with all these things. because it will just, there won't be any obstacles or restrictions that, oh no, that doesn't work, or how can that work? It's like nothing is impossible with God. That's what it says. You know, the Bible even says that. Well, actually, that's what it means. Nothing is impossible with God. So fun days we live in, and it's an exciting time to live, I think. You know, I know a lot of people are doom and gloom merchants, and it's great. You know, another rapture theory has passed. You know, so for those of you who are looking at the eclipse, you know, you weren't raptured while you were looking at it. It passed without event, as usual. And those who are now looking for September the 23rd or whenever it is, that will pass as well without an event, and we'll still be here. You know.
Now, just as a side note on the eclipse, this is the first time that I've ever lived in an area that had a good exposure to it, and we had 97% darkness.
Awesome.
And what was amazing was how much light 3% of the sun still produces.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which was fascinating. The fact that the light, the color of the light was totally different. I mean, I just sat here at my desk and I was like, this is really cool. But I said to Joe, I can see why in centuries past, when something like that happened, why it freaked people out.
Yeah.
And why they thought it was the end of the world, or why they thought it was some monumental sign of some doom and gloom about ready to come. Because, you know, we all knew when it was coming. We all knew exactly when it was going to happen. You knew exactly what to do. But for you to be in the middle of your workday and then all of a sudden the sun disappears and it goes dark, especially for people that are in the 100% zone, that would be a really freaky thing. So it was just a really neat experience. And I know I didn't get raptured. I'm still here.
Oh, dear. Yeah, absolutely.
Missed it.
And of course, the Bible uses those signs to indicate the ends of seasons and the end of government and the end of the Babylonian and the end of the Egyptian and the end of the Assyrian and the end of the Old Covenant. The same language is used, but people are looking at it as a physical thing, and therefore every physical thing they're attributing something to it, where it wasn't talking about a physical thing. It was just talking about, here's a description of something that says something is coming to an end and something new is beginning. Unfortunately, people take it on board with the whole eschatology and judgment and everything else and turn it into something that it really isn't. You know, unfortunately. I mean, and I've been privileged to observe a full eclipse, you know, and it was actually in the place I was born, you know, in 2000 and something. We went home, the whole family went home, went back to where my mum was, and we all went down to the beach, and because it was in August, and we basically saw the total, you know, eclipse, you know. And it is eerie. It is an eerie thing, because everything stops. All the birds stop singing. Everything actually stops. The sound. Everything is like, whoa, it's silence here. So I can understand, yes, and that's why God used those terminologies to describe it, because people did think of it in those terms. This is the end of the world. Well, it was the end of their world, as it was the end of the Jewish world at the end of the Old Covenant. You know, it was. You know, but people now, it's like, how many forests have been cut down with people writing books, making predictions of the rapture or when someone's going to come, Jesus is going to come back or whatever. And, you know, none of them. I mean, I've got loads of them on my bookshelf. I keep them there as a reminder of the futility of trying to actually guess something which is impossible to guess, you know, and I've got loads of dates, you know, I mean, you've been through some of them, you know, Y2K. Well, the whole world is going to come to the end because the computers are all going to stop. Planes are going to fall out of the sky. Blah, blah, blah. Nothing happened. You know, nothing happened at all. And the same with all the other predictions of who and this person is going to be that and everything else, because they're based in a wrong premise, an understanding of God and his character and nature, and in judgment being afflicting the world with something, rather than blessing the world with something. But I smile, and you know, I smile when I see all these Facebook posts and think, oh, I wonder how many of those prophets, so-called prophets, are now going to come out and say, sorry, we got it wrong. we must be false prophets. I guarantee none of them. You know, they're just silent now until the next thing where they'll come out with something else. You know, because that's what they do. You know, how many times has the world been going to end? 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar. Oh, another world's going to end. And now something's going to happen in 2017 in September when, you know, Virgo is aligned with the sun and blah, blah, because it says it's going to be Revelation 12. No, Revelation 12 already happened, you know, in 80, 70. So it ain't going to happen again. Just isn't. So it's just nonsense, you know, total nonsense. But it tickles people's ears and it creates fear a lot of the time. Yes, the enemy loves it. The enemy loves us creating our own fear scenarios of God's judgment, painting God as the bad guy who's going to pour out his wrath on America or the UK, you know. And then you have the latest ones that everything's going to wind up in 2028 because that's when Jesus is going to return. And they're quite well-known people who are saying this stuff, you know. Well, I'm just thinking, wow, why don't you just keep your mouth shut? You know, it's just like, because now, you know, you've said it. But they don't seem to hold any responsibility for the things they say. You know, all the blood moons, that was the last one, wasn't it? Oh, everything's going to happen, the Shemitah or whatever, it's going to happen, the blood moon, and now you're going to have the finances are going to collapse, and they haven't. You know? Doesn't mean that it won't, but it won't be anything to do with there's a series of blood moons in the sky. You know? Because it just isn't, you know, but bless them. Anyway, all right. Okay, well.